Welcome everyone to Candid's Introduction to Proposal Writing. My name is Lori Guidry. I'm an educational programming manager with Candid. As I mentioned, I am based in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I will be assisted today by Carla Norris. I'll let Carla say hi.
Hello, everyone. Nice to have you all joining us today. Thank you.
And Carla is based on the opposite coast in New York City. So Candid covers the country. I also want to introduce our co-hosts today. We have a community of Candid partners that help make our resources, such as GuideStar and Foundation Directory, available to people all over the country. And one of those is the Springfield Greene County Library in Springfield, Missouri. And Crystal Smith is going to join us to tell us a little bit about the library services and what help you can get for what nonprofits in her area can access. So Crystal.
Hello, I'm Crystal. I'm the reference manager here at the Midtown Carnegie branch of the Springfield Greene County Library. And as part of my reference manager duties, I help nonprofits find funding both through Candid and the Foundation Directory, as well as some local resources that we have here in Southwest Missouri. Next slide. So this is the Midtown Carnegie Library. This is where the Foundation Directory is housed for the whole Springfield Greene County District. So this is the place where you need to go. We've got our address and phone number there, as well as the Find Us tool for Candid. So you can see if you go to that link that we're kind of the only one in the area. I think the next closest ones are in Fayetteville, and then there's one kind of in central Missouri. So we kind of provide it for people in all sorts of areas, not just in our county itself. And the phone number is there. Sorry, Lori. If you need to contact me, you can reach me at that phone number. All right, next slide. So these are the different ways that you can access it at our library. You don't have to necessarily use our computers if you don't want to. As long as you're at our location and on our Wi-Fi, you'll be able to access it. So you can either come and do that with your own device, which is helpful because then you can save things on your own device. You can use one of the computers in our PC room, or we have a special computer training center that's a little bit more private. And then you can also schedule a one-on-one appointment with me or another one of my staff, and we can go over how Foundation Directory works, some local resources for proposal writing and grant writing and things like that. So I will give it back to Lori.
Okay, thank you, Crystal. And I also want to put up another slide to note this is where you find us. As I mentioned, Candid puts out Foundation Directory, which lets you look for funders, and also GuideStar, which helps funders locate you. And both of those are available to use for free at the Springfield Greene Library. Otherwise, they are subscription products. And if you're not in that particular area, this is where you can find us. And Carla, if you drop that link in the chat for the Find Us, we're at over 1,000 locations now in both the US and a few in Mexico. So that's where you can access those databases. Candid was formed in 2019 as a merger between Foundation Center and GuideStar. And our motto is that we get you the information you need to do good. We collect tons of data on the social sector. We make a lot of that data available through our directories, Foundation Directory and GuideStar. As I said, they're subscription products, but you can also use them for free at our Candid community partners around the country. All right, so let's get into proposal writing. So I'm going to give you an idea of what we're going to talk about today, but also want to let you know that proposal writing is just part of the whole grant seeking process. There's a before and after that we'll touch on briefly. We're mainly talking about putting the proposal together today, but there are different steps to the process. And the ultimate goal is not only to get that grant, but also to build a relationship with a funder. That's really important. And we'll talk about that when we talk about the follow-up. So these are some of the things that you should be able to know or to do it by the end of this. And that's to list the basic elements of a proposal, We'll show you how you draft a standard project proposal. One thing you'll hear me say over and over again is that, every funder is different. So what they require when it comes to getting a grant is going to vary from funder to funder. But what we're going to talk about are what are the basic elements of most proposals? What are the things most funders are going to want to know, what questions that they ask, and how you answer those. The other thing we will do is identify next steps for submitting the grant proposal. What happens if they say yes, what happens if they say no, and then how you follow up with the funder after you submit that proposal. Okay, as I said, today we're going to focus on the writing part of the process, but this is really what the entire process looks like. There's planning, there's the research, then you get to the writing, and then there's the follow-up. So all of these steps are really important, and we have trainings that touch on these other steps, but the writing is just part of it. So you could write the most perfect proposal, but if you haven't done your planning and your research in particular, you may not be as successful as you could be. The first thing you need to know also in just getting started is that this can be a long process. You don't apply for a grant when you need money to, pay the bills next month or something. From start to finish, it can take anywhere from 6 to 9 months. That's an average. Some take less, some take more, but it does take time from the time you submit the proposal to get it reviewed, to get it approved, all of that. Longer than most of us feel it should, but that's what it is right now. So the planning session, the planning where that comes in is determining what you are going to be applying for the money for. In other words, what do you need to fund? Most grants are what we call project or program oriented. In other words, they're going to be money that's for a particular initiative that you have or a particular program, whether that's feeding the hungry or helping mentor teenage girls or whatever. The grant is going to be for the actual direct service that you are providing. There are what we call general operating support grants. That's sort of the holy grail of grant seeking. In other words, these are a good way to look at it is these are unrestricted grants versus restricted grants. Restricted grants are for a particular program or project. You can only spend it on those direct services. An unrestricted grant, general operating support, it's still the exception rather than the rule. A lot of funders are hearing nonprofits say, well, if we can't, keep the lights on, if we can't maintain our building, if we can't pay for good people, then how can we put on good programs? Okay, we all know that those sort of overhead costs can be very important. But the fact is most grants, when you're applying for them, they are going to be for a particular project or program. So you need to think about what's involved in that. What are the costs of that that you're going to need to put on those types of things and how you're going to present that to the funder. The next step, research, also very important. When we ask funders why they don't, make a grant to a particular organization, the most common answer is that we weren't aligned in our mission. So that's where the research comes in, and that's where Foundation Directory comes in, which, as we mentioned, you can use at our partners like Springfield Green Library, but you have to decide who you're going to approach for a grant. In other words, you're looking for a foundation whose mission is aligned with yours. Funders also have a mission. They're trying to make change in a particular sphere of life. And so they're looking to fund organizations that can do that because they don't do it themselves. They're looking to fund those types of organizations. So your goal in using something like Foundation Directory is to find out what funders are interested in what you do, whether that's the arts or community development or education. You have to find the right funder before you approach them, or your chances of getting that grant are, not very good. It's not the spray and pray approach where you just send out funding letters to everyone. You really need to narrow it down and focus on those who are most likely to support your cause. So then we'll come to the writing, how to put it all together. And we're going to, that's really the purpose of most of the class. So that's just the one part. And then we're also going to talk about the follow-up. In other words, what to do once that decision has been made. All right. And yes, this tip, always follow the funder's guidelines. That supersedes everything. As I mentioned, funders are all different. If you know one, you just know one. So if anything I tell you today is not included or contradicts something that the funder asks for, then you have to write what the funder wants. You have to answer the questions that they have and follow their particular guidelines. Okay, when it comes to formatting, most grant makers today use an online format. The days of, putting together, a 100-page grant proposal and sending it out through the mail are long past us. So most of them use online formats, which has its, pros and cons. And a lot of them may not have a specific format. It's a very, loosey-goosey format. Some have very detailed questions that they need you to ask, and they have word limits. Others may do something as simple as just tell us about yourself. So they're going to have different formats, but our goal with this class is, what we suggest is that you put together more or less a boilerplate proposal. And this is a template proposal. Because funders are so different, you can't reuse a proposal that you sent to one funder to another funder, but you can repurpose it. It's similar to sending out resumes when you're looking for a job. You're not going to send the exact same cover or resume to each position. You're going to try to tailor it to what the employer says they're looking for. And that's the same thing with proposals for grants, is that you want to tailor it to that particular funder to increase your chances. But a lot of the questions that they ask are going to be very similar. I'm just going to ask you to put in chat right now. Let's say you were the funder. What are some of the things that you think they would want to know? What would you want to know from organizations before you gave out money? Okay, their mission, demographics served, budget, outcomes. How long have you been around? Why are you qualified to handle the money? Very good. Timeline, are they using it correctly? Other funders, yeah. Yeah, these are all great answers. And we're going to talk about these because these are, a lot of people have already mentioned a lot of the things I'm going to talk about what goes into the proposal and what you should do. And I want to note one more thing about online format. It's important when you're writing your template or your boilerplate proposal to put it in a Word doc or something. And the reason is online formats, some of them can be kind of wonky. A lot of times you're putting, pasting it in, but it may not save all the way, or you have to save one page before you move to the other page or things like that. So what you want to do when you're writing a proposal is that you're going to have this in a Word document, not with a lot of formatting or anything like that, but just so that you can cut and paste it in. But the last thing you want to happen is to put it in this online format and then it doesn't save, or there's a power surge or something like that. So you want to make sure you've prepared your proposal before you actually enter it into the application system. Or that could, that could be a disaster if you don't do that. So I'll just say that about formatting. Okay, so these are some of the typical elements of a proposal that we're going to talk about. First of all is the executive summary. And that's basically just a brief overview of everything that you're talking about in the proposal. And that's the narrative. So that includes the statement of need. And we're going to go over each of these separately. The statement of need, the project description, background information about the organization, and then a conclusion that wraps up, why you're applying for this particular grant, why you think that you are deserving of this grant, and why your mission aligns with that funder's. And then there's also going to be a budget proportion, and we have a whole nother class on doing project budgets, because as you can imagine, that's very involved. It's very important though. Sometimes funders will look at the budget before they look at anything else. So it's important to put that together. And then supporting materials, that again varies from funder to funder. Some may want your 501c3 letter is very commonly, but they may want other things like audited financial statements or things like that. So those are extras. And again, it depends on who the funder is. So what funders really want to know, what you're trying to do in your proposal is to make the case for support. A grant is really, it's kind of an investment if you look at it. If you were a for-profit company looking for investors, it's a similar process and approach. You're looking for a grant for someone to invest in your mission, a mission that you hopefully share together. And that's what, and like with any investment, they're looking for high rate of return, low risk. In other words, they want to know if you're able to do what you say you're going to do. So these are some of the questions they're going to ask. And again, I'm going to go into all of them. This is the first one. What specific need are you addressing? What are you trying to achieve? What is your strategy for making it happen? And how will you know if you're successful? And the first thing is important. We talk about need and the need statement that you're going to do. Now, when I say need, it's not about the need of your organization. It's not, we need money or we need volunteers or we need this. No, the need that you're addressing is really the issue that you are working on, the problem that you're trying to solve, or the people that you're trying to help. This is an example of the need. It's not, oh, we need, we need money for 3 more trucks to deliver food. No, the need is that there are hungry people in our community and we want to see that they get fed. Okay, that's an example of a need. So it's not enough to just state the problem. You want to make sure that you can back it up. Your proposal, you're going to have to do a little research also on just the issue that you're working on. You want to present some statistics and things that show that you understand the scope of the problem. So for example, you wouldn't just say in the proposal, we're working on homelessness. We're trying to solve homelessness in San Francisco. Okay. Number one, that's not very specific. And you're assuming that the funder knows that San Francisco has a problem with this. You want to be more specific. How big is the problem? In other words, what percentage of San Franciscans or what number of people do you estimate are living on the street who are housing insecure? What are the geographic boundaries that you're going to be working on? Are you really working all over the city of San Francisco, or maybe are you just working in a particular neighborhood? Okay, that's the kind of thing. And if you are in that neighborhood, why are you there? Are there a high percentage of people in that neighborhood? This is the kind of data that you will want to present. And if so, how many of those people are you reasonably expecting to help? So this is what you want to do when you're defining the need. The need is really a statement of the problem that you're trying to solve. So as I said, you want to be prepared to, define the parameters of that problem or that issue. And again, you also want to make sure it fits the size and scale of your solution. We're going to talk more about that in a minute, about setting what you're trying to achieve. Now, that's something else that a lot of funders are going to want to know. What are your outcomes? Now, this is really where you kind of get into your project description. This will probably be one of the longer sections. And this is a statement of the project goals and objectives. Okay, so what are goals and objectives? We use these very interchangeably. Some people say outcomes. Goals are usually broader. Outcomes or objectives flow from those goals, they're usually a little more specific, but those are the kinds of terms that you'll see in grant applications. You know, what are your goals? What outcomes are you trying to achieve? What are your objectives? Now, we use an acronym called SMART to encourage people to set these goals in a way that they make sense. So SMART refers to specific, measurable, achievable, and realistic within a time frame. Okay, again, we have to set parameters for the problem. Let me back up again. So for example, let's say in the case of, we were talking about homelessness in San Francisco. Specific, again, you're not working on homelessness altogether in San Francisco. You have to be a little more specific. What exactly are you doing? Are you working on providing people homes? Are you working on homeless policy? Or are you just working on providing, immediate services and help for the people who are actually living on the street? So be specific in what you're trying to achieve. Like I said, you're not solving homelessness. Measurable. How many people will be helped? With what you're doing. If you're providing beds, how many beds are you providing? If you're providing services, how many people are you attempting to reach? Again, you can define the parameters of homelessness, but realistically, you're not going to reach 100% of those people. What percentage of those people are you trying to reach? And exactly how many services, how many beds, how many meals are you trying to provide for them? Outcomes should be measurable. It should also be achievable. Again, you're solving a little part of the problem. As I said, you're either providing shelter, you're providing meals, you're providing assistance. And it also needs to be results oriented, results that you can achieve. Okay, you are one organization, depending on your size. You want the funder to believe that what you're trying to do, you can actually do. Now, a larger organization may be able to reach 90% of the homeless people, but maybe you're a smaller organization working in a smaller area. Maybe you're only realistically going to reach 40 or 50% of those people in the area. So it has to be, the goal has to be relative to what you are actually able to accomplish with your resources and your organization. And then the last one, T, is a time frame. Most grant funding is for a year, 2 or 3 years at the most, especially for a new grant, you're looking at a year. So you're talking about objectives or what you're trying to achieve within a year's time span. Okay, maybe long-term, you hope to add and have, 100 beds, whereas now you have 50. Those are the kinds of things that will come down the line. But when you're talking about your objectives, you want to put a time frame around it, that this is what we have or what we can achieve within this year or within this 2 years of the grant. Okay, now this is still part of the project description. What are your strategies for making it happen? So this is where you get into the who, what, when, where, and why of what you're doing, especially the who. How many people do you have working on this? If you're going around sending armies of people in the street to see what's needed, how many people are doing that? Or do you have volunteers? Again, where are you working? What specific, parameters, whether it's a neighborhood, a city, or a region, where are you working? What are you doing exactly? Again, that gets back to, we are doing X, Y, and Z. We're providing mental health services or addiction services, or again, we're providing placement. Are you working with a particular portion? If you were describing homeless people, are you working with more with addicts, or are you working more with families, trying to get them off the street? So these are the kind of the nuts and bolts of what you're doing. This is also in strategies where you want to highlight any partnerships you have. Funders love to see nonprofits working together. So if you do have collaborations with other groups, this is where you want to point it out in your strategy. We are providing meals in partnership with the AME church that's in the neighborhood. So we're going there and they're providing a space to put these meals, or maybe they're referring people to our services. So if you're collaborating, if you have any partners or things like that, you want to outline that. You want to outline things like how long you're working on this. Do you work on your problem 8 hours a day, or is this a 24-hour-a-day thing or a weekend? These are all the kind of nitty-gritty things that go into your strategy. And you're going to describe this in your proposal. So they have a really good idea of what you're doing. And so you can kind of see what you need the money for. What people you have to pay, or places that you have to rent, things like that. Now, how do you know if you're successful? This is what we call program evaluation. A lot of funders are going to want to know about this, not all of them, but how do you know if you're successful? And you want to mention that in the proposal. And this is where having those SMART objectives come in, because if they are measurable, then you can identify what your key indicators of success. If you have a goal to distribute X number of meals, then one of your indicators is how many meals did we distribute? How many people got those meals? And now these things, evaluation, it can be quantitative like that in terms of counting things, but it can also be qualitative. It's not always possible to do that kind of quantitative evaluation. This is easier for some organizations than others. Yeah, if you're providing meals, if you're providing vaccines, if things like that, you can easily count them and say, this is what they do. We fed people, we made people healthier. But a lot of other types of organizations, the results are a little more nebulous, a little more touchy-feely. And it might be qualitative data that you're going to bring to this discussion. In other words, we want people to feel a certain way. So let's say you had a program that was mentoring teenage girls or something like that. So there can be quantitative measures of that. How many girls are in the class? Did it result in, how did they respond at school? Did participating in this program to raise their self-esteem, did it help raise their grades? Did their grades go up? Did their teachers and parents report less risky behaviors? Those are kind of, hard data, quantitative things that you can measure, but there's also the quantitative. How do they report feeling about being in the program? Did they recommend the program to their friends? Did they report having higher self-esteem, or did they report that they felt more dedicated to their school? These are the kinds of things that, not only will the funder want to know, but it's probably good for your programs too. This is that feedback from the people you're helping or from the issue that you're working on that lets you know that you're making a difference. And that's what you want to point out to funders. And if you've been working the program and you have this data, then you can say, yes, we have made this type of difference in this many people's lives. So that's really what that is. As we all know, it takes time and sometimes money to gather this data. At the very simplest level, just collecting anecdotes from the people that you're working from. That kind of anecdotal evaluation can go a long way to put in there, a quote or something like that. So you can put that all the way up to the kind of, hard studies, quantitative long-term studies that, everybody loves to see. But again, it takes time, it takes money to do those, and you might not have that. But you want to show that you have thought about, what you're trying to achieve and how you will measure it and what it looks like if you are successful. That's the main thing. Okay, why are you the best organization to do this work? After all, there are a lot of nonprofits out there that are probably working on something similar to yours. So at some point, you want to point out what's good about your particular organization. Provide some background about what you've done, what you've been able to accomplish, and if you have already done this measurement, what has been the result of that measurement. So probably one of the big questions that's going to come up is, what do you do if you don't have a track record yet? If you are a brand new organization and you're just starting to do this work, how are you going to qualify for that grant? And it is going to be a challenge. A lot of funders, they really, someone mentioned in the chat, one of the things that you would want to know from an organization is, can you do this? So if you haven't done it yet, it's kind of hard to convince them that you can do it. The thing I would recommend, usually startup organizations, you might have to look at other things besides grant funding, whether it's individual donors or some other things. Sometimes a startup, if you have people behind the startup who have a track record, that may be something else you can point out. Because in this section, you are also going to talk about who your leaders are, what their experience and their background is. So if you're a startup, but you're being run by someone who maybe has a long track record of working with successful nonprofits, that might help in order to get you that grant. But a lot of funders aren't looking to take a chance on a brand new organization or a brand new concept. They are looking for something a little more tried and true. So yeah, it'll be a challenge for a brand new organization to get a grant. Not impossible, but it will be a lot more challenging. And how will the project sustain itself in the long run? Most funders do not want to be the only source for your grant, because that's kind of it could be a recipe for failure. As I mentioned, most grants are only for a year or two. So if they think, okay, well, once we pull our funding, you're going to collapse, that's not a good investment for them. So you want to point out how you're going to sustain this project. That usually means that you will have other funders that you have already worked with, or maybe you have individual donors. Maybe you're sitting on a big fat donation from someone that's going to help you get started on doing this. But your finances are going to be very important for the funder to look at. And as I mentioned about the budget, sometimes that's the first thing in. How have you been making it so far? Because this grant will be a supplement to what you're doing. But again, funders don't want to be the only source for your project. That's a lot of pressure on that. And this is something you think about when you're putting your budget together. If you're running a program that costs $100,000 to run, you're probably not going to get all of that from one funder. That's not a good strategy. You may want to look at for 5 funders for $20,000 each, or 3 funders, or whatever. But going to one funder and saying, this is the complete cost of my program and I want a grant to cover this, that's probably not going to fly. They want to know that you have other resources for the money. So, but again, the budget, very important. Sometimes the first thing they want to see. All right. I'm going to switch gears here just for a minute, because I talked about the planning stage for writing this. And I mentioned Foundation Directory, which is what you will use to research what funders to apply to. I also want to mention Candid's other directory, which is GuideStar, and where we have Candid profiles. GuideStar is where a lot of funders look when they're doing their due diligence about grants that are grant applications that are coming in. GuideStar is a directory of over 2 million nonprofit organizations, both foundations and 501c3 charities and others. But it's made up, the basis for GuideStar is primarily IRS data. So in other words, if you're a 501c3 organization, if you filed a tax return before, then you're already in GuideStar. That data has already been uploaded there. But what we do is we give you a chance to what we call claim your profile. In other words, claim that basic information, and then you can add more information to tell your own story. You can tell them what your mission is instead of just having the category, on there from the IRS. You can tell them what your mission is. You can present your logo and materials. You present your financial data. All this information that goes into a Candid profile on GuideStar is information that the organizations themselves provide. And I should mention that this is free for any nonprofit to do. The people who pay for GuideStar are the ones who are looking for nonprofits to fund. So this includes institutions like foundations, donor advised funds. That's who's looking in GuideStar for the information. But it is free for you to claim your profile and build it up by earning what we call seals of transparency. There are 4 levels of seals, starting with the bronze seal, which is very easy to earn. All you have to do is share your basic mission and your contact information. Make sure it's up to date, because sometimes the IRS, the tax files, if they haven't been updated, they may not have the most current information. So just by earning bronze, you just make sure that that information is up to date. And also that people know if they stumble on that profile, where they can donate to, and then a simple mission statement. That's the bronze level seal. Move up, you get a silver seal. That's where you can provide more information about your programs, some of that project description that we talked about by saying these are the services that we offer. This is where you add that information as well as any brand details. You can upload a logo, you can upload, brochures that you have or videos, things like that. You can add all of that to earn a silver seal. Then the gold seal, a little more involved. In addition, you'll need to add additional financial information to supplement your tax return information. And this is where you add leadership information, who's running your organization, who works there, in particular demographic information. So many funders, DEI is very important, diversity, equity, and inclusion. They want to know that your leadership looks like the community that you're serving. So this is where you add that information to earn that gold seal. And then the platinum level, at the highest level, this is where you highlight your impact. This is where you put in things like the measures of your progress, the results, what your objectives are, things like that, your strategy. That's what you would do to earn the platinum seal. Now, if all of this sounds familiar, this is a lot of the data that goes into a proposal. So if you have your boilerplate proposal or your proposal template, you should be able to answer a lot of these questions fairly easy to earn that seal. And in addition to, we have subscribers to GuideStar, and GuideStar is also available at our partners, libraries like Springfield, Greene County. But then a lot of other places also use GuideStar on the back end. So if you're doing a Facebook fundraiser or something, this is how they verify your charitable status, is by using GuideStar. Donor advised funds. These are funds that wealthy, or not even, doesn't have to be terribly wealthy individuals, but that individuals set up to give to nonprofit organizations, but rather than them doing the research, they rely on someone else to make, to recommend what organizations they give it to. So Fidelity Charitable, Vanguard Charitable, these are becoming some of the largest funders of nonprofits in the country. How do they make their decisions? How do they determine where to tell people to invest their money? They're using GuideStar on the back end. They're going in there and they're doing their research, make sure you're in good standing, and also to know what you do. So if one of the holders of these funds says they're interested in supporting environmental groups in the Bay Area. So Fidelity Charitable can go in there, find a list of those environmental groups, and the ones that have the most information, they look like better prospects than the ones that have less. So that's another reason to make sure your Candid profile is up to date. And particularly when you're applying for grants, a lot of grant management software, you do that online application, that software on the back end often is tied in to GuideStar and Candid profiles. So they're pulling information for that. And in addition, when you claim your profile now, you can get what we call a shareable link. As I mentioned, GuideStar is a subscription database, but with this charitable link, you can share your GuideStar profile with anyone who's interested. You can provide them this link, whether it's a funder or an individual donor. They can go right to GuideStar and see all your information without having to log in or do anything like that. So that's another advantage. So I'm going to do another quick little poll here before I just give you a brief overview on how to do this. How many of you have claimed your profile or know about sharing? I'm going to ask Carla to launch that poll now. Got a lot of thumbs up. Good, good. Okay, so have you seen your nonprofit's Candid profile? No or don't know, yes, or you've earned a seal. So let's see if we can get to about 75% of participation. Almost there. Okay, Carla, I think we'll end it now. And we'll share the results. Okay, so more than half of you are not sure or don't know whether you have claimed the profile. So you've got some homework tonight to find out if that profile is claimed, certainly before the next Giving Tuesday. Again, that's a big time of year for nonprofits, and a lot of people are coming to us to find out, what nonprofits they might want to donate to. So you've got at least that long to work on getting your profile and starting to earn seals. But I'm happy to see a fair amount of you have earned some, even some platinum seal holders. So that's great. Okay, I'm going to see if I can run this little short. Okay.
Building out your Candid nonprofit profile is a great way to build credibility and tell your organization's story to potential funders and donors. The information you share also shows up on our partners' donation sites, including Facebook charitable fundraising and donor-advised funds such as Fidelity and Schwab. Get started to raise your organization's visibility in just 3 simple steps. First, create your Candid account using your work email. Using your work email simplifies the authorization process. Once you have created your Candid account, log in and search for your organization to connect to its profile. Complete a brief form to help us verify that you represent your organization. Then click Submit, and our support team will review your request. You can start updating your organization's profile as soon as the request is approved. All you need to earn a bronze seal of transparency is to share basic organizational info. Add more information to earn silver, gold, and platinum seals. Get started today. Create your account and claim your organization's profile to tell your story.
All right. So now in the time it took to run that video, you could probably have at least claimed your profile, if not earned even a bronze seal. So I'm just going to have Carla drop this link in the chat if you have more questions about how to claim your profile and earn a seal. But again, this is we've had people tell us, even for writing proposals, a lot of times they have all of that information already in GuideStar, and it saves them time when funders start asking those strategic questions about what you're trying to achieve and how you're measuring it, because they've already used that to earn a platinum seal. So as I said, once you have your boilerplate proposal put together, it should be even easier, go quicker for you in earning the various seals. Okay, so back to the proposal. So we've gone through the major section, which is the narrative. And then the conclusion. So this is last, but this is the part, and in some applications, it may not be last, but at some point you want to speak to the particular funder's guidelines and interest. As I mentioned, just like with applying for the job, what's in it for them? Why are you coming to them? And this is where you talk about, because you've done your research. Hey, we know that you are interested in community theater that's a little more avant-garde, and we're that type of theater. So we know that you might be interested in funding us. Let us tell you about the things that we do and why we think this meets with your interest. So something like that. At some point, you want to tie it into say, so that they know that you are speaking directly to them. This is not a generic proposal for a grant, but this was something that was tailor-made for them. So that's what you want to do with this section. And as I said, it may come last, it may not, it depends on, but this is something at one point you want to work in. Even if they don't specifically ask for it, at some point you want to tell them why you're coming to them. Now, the executive summary, we put that last, even though it would probably go first in the actual proposal, but the executive summary is sort of that wrap up of the whole proposal. Similar, think about, a high school term paper, how they used to say to write term papers. First, you tell them what you're going to tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. So first, you're going to telling them what you're going to tell them. That's the executive summary. And this is what you basically want to condense your proposal down to just one page. So it will include, back up here. It will include your statement of need, the project or program that you're working on, and a brief description. And that can be really hard to narrow that down, but you've got to do that. A brief description of what you're trying to do and your strategy for doing it. And then maybe a short paragraph or a couple of sentences on your organization and why you're qualified to do it. And then you want to have the ask, what you're asking for. Now, the executive summary is important because this can also double as the letter of inquiry, or the LOI. Letter of inquiry, sometimes called letter of intent, because often this is the first thing that a funder wants to see, is just that one summary before you even send them a complete proposal. They want to see that one-page summary and make a determination as to whether this is something they even might be interested in before they get all the nitty-gritty details, the budget, and all of that. Is this something we might be interested in funding? So that executive summary can double as that LOI that you would send out first, but it has to be condensed. It has to be condensed down to a few paragraphs, one page, or not much more than that. We also teach a class, proposal writing boot camp, where we have people write LOIs of about 500 words. That's a good thing to shoot for. And as I said, it can be very challenging, but you want to get the funder's attention first before you go through submitting all the other documentation and things you have to submit for the grant. And that's really what the summary is. And along with the budget, the executive summary may be the first thing they read. They look at the executive summary, look at the budget, and then they have a good idea whether, we think we might fund them or we may not. It may not be a done deal. They still have to get all the details, but those two things are very important to get those right up front. Supporting materials. Okay, again, follow the funder's guidelines. This can vary, again, from funder to funder. A lot of times they will want to see your 501c3 determination letter. And if I haven't said that, if you are not a 501c3 or you're not fiscally sponsored by a 501c3, the chances of getting a grant are slim to none. By IRS guidelines, foundations are also nonprofit organizations. They have to give to organizations that are set up for a charitable purpose. And if they don't, they have to go through a lot of explanation to the IRS as to why they didn't, which is why most funders will not do that. So it is important, a requirement really for you to have your 501c3, and often they will ask for your letter of determination. So that's one of the things. And then the rest, it may vary. They may want to see more financial documents. They, for example, an audited financial statement or a balance sheet or things like that. The important thing is to include everything they ask for, but very little of anything else. Don't bombard them with additional material unless you want to do something like through a link. If it's an online application and maybe say your local newspaper did a nice write-up about your organization or interviewed someone, it's okay to send a link to that, but don't start sending attachments and things for this unless it's something that they asked for. Board of directors information. This is usually where they will also ask for, maybe some background or things on a board, on who's serving on your board. That's something. But again, answer the question, but don't send them a lot of miscellaneous information if they didn't really ask for it. And then the final thing, especially for the online, once you have this in your Word document, please have multiple people proofread it. The last thing you want is to send something out where there are mistakes, there are grammatical errors. Often writing a proposal can be a team sport. In a lot of organizations, there are a lot of different people who contribute because you need to get information from the program people, from financial people, and things like that. So even though one person may be overseeing it, as I said, it's a team sport. A lot of people are going to contribute. And because of that, you need to have that check at the end for you to proofread it and to have someone else have more than one set of eyes on it. If you've been writing it after a while, you just see what you think is supposed to be there. So that, again, it makes you look like a careful organization. You don't want to send something out with a lot of typos or bad writing. It reflects poorly. It doesn't, and your organization may be doing great work, but you're trying to impress. You're looking for funds for an investment. You want to impress them that you are the type of person who is careful and correct. So please proofread before you send anything out. Okay, we're getting to the end here, and we're going to take questions after a while. The next session is to follow up. You'll get a yes or you'll get a no. If you get an answer is yes, that's great. Okay, you don't have a lot to worry about. You've done everything right. You'll usually receive a grant agreement letter, that you'll sign and say you are getting the funds to use for this purpose. Sometimes you won't. Sometimes they'll just say, here's the check. Doesn't happen as often as it should, but it can happen. But so you'll need to review it and sign it and follow up. The other thing, though, is if the answer is yes, even if they don't ask you for check-ins and follow-ups and things like that, you want to keep the funder informed. As we said, this is about forming a relationship. So even if they don't specifically say you have to check in, it would be a good idea to check in every now and then, tell them how the money's being spent, any goals that you hit, anything like that, just to kind of let them know, again, we are grateful. This is what the money's helping for. So when you need to go back and apply again, they'll be open to that. As I said, this is the start of a relationship. Certainly be responsive if they do have deadlines that you have to meet, and then do what you said you were going to do. Okay, that's basically the main thing to follow up with if the answer is yes. And just, foster this relationship. That's the best thing you can do, so that when you need more money or when you need recommendations, maybe next year they can't fund you, but they'll say, hey, maybe you can try this foundation here, and they can make a recommendation for you. So you want to foster that relationship. Now, say the answer is no, and you are going to hear no probably more often than yes. We estimate, 1 out of 3 funders will say yes. It may be higher these days. That was an old estimate, but you are going to hear no quite a bit, and that's okay. The first thing to do is, of course, to find out, not take it personally, but to find out why. To ask the funder via phone call or email or whatever to say, why was the answer no? Sometimes it really isn't personal. It could be they ran out of funds for that year, or they were, they're changing priorities. It can be any number of reasons. And you may not find out exactly why, but the most important thing is to try to find out, is this a hard no or is it a soft no? In other words, can we come back and apply again for funding? If you were just out this year, or if you're changing your priorities, might we fit later? And you want to ask graciously. You can't demand an answer, but it's certainly, you should definitely reach out and try to find out why, and try to find out if it's worth applying again. And if they do seem encouraging about it, just like before, stay in touch. Periodically send them information, tell them what you're doing, how you're succeeding at it. Those are the kinds of things you want to do. But again, if it's a hard no, then it's time to move on and seek other prospects. But if you don't ask the question, you don't know what kind of no it was. So that's a thing to follow up with. So now some key takeaways before we get into the Q&A. First of all, start with that outline, that basic Word document, minimum formatting that you just keep on hand. And again, you can't reuse everything in there, but you can certainly repurpose it, use it as a template to get started each time you're applying for a grant. Once you learn information about that funder, you can throw that in there. Okay, so start with that outline. Keep the language clear and concise, and focus on the funder's interest. Again, what's in it for them? How are you aligned with their mission? How are you going to help them achieve what they're trying to achieve? Follow the guidelines. 100% read the guidelines and follow them. Whatever they say, whatever they want to know, tell them what they need to know. Not a whole lot of anything else. So follow the guidelines. They'll differ for every funder. And always revise and edit before submitting, just to make sure that, everything looks good. Let me get to a couple of those questions, though. This came up in several questions, but it's about organizations that don't have an open application process. So we say a lot of those organizations, and you'll see it listed in foundation directories. Sometimes it says by invite only, or no unsolicited proposals accepted. That is not unusual. Probably, at least half the organizations in foundation directory says that. However, remember, foundations are created to give out money, and those organizations are giving out plenty of grants every year. So they are not closed to you, but there is a different approach to those. So what I would suggest, if there's not an online application process, is that you send out that letter of inquiry, okay? Or also, if possible, sometimes in those, in the profiles in foundation directory, they'll list contact information. If you can make a contact at the foundation, first of all, if you do your research, you can get an idea of what this funder has been funding. So if they look like they've been funding organizations similar to yours that you would like to, that they might be interested in you, the simplest thing is to try to make that contact via an email or a call and just say, hey, I see that you're funding these types of community theater groups. I'm a community theater group. Would you be interested? And then maybe you can send, if you can't get someone on the phone or through email, then send them that letter of inquiry just to find out. It doesn't hurt. And as a lot of times those funders are interested in finding new organizations. They just don't want to be bombarded with a lot of applications that may not fit. So they're a little more selective about how they do it, but you can get in front of those funders. As I said, they're funding, hundreds of nonprofit organizations every year. So don't let that discourage you if they don't have an open application process. And again, the things that we've talked about, these are a lot of the same questions they're going to want to know. Another question I anticipated was for, new nonprofits. Yes, as I said, it's very hard to get funded if you don't have that track record. There are not really foundations there are a few that might say they do seed money. In my experience, that doesn't seem very common. You're not going to get money to start a nonprofit from a foundation. They're looking for organizations that are already doing the work. Someone else, how do you recommend establishing an introduction to funders? Again, you need to do your homework on that funder. Again, if you can find, you don't have to, they may not have an open process, but you can find out who they funded before. So the best thing would be to see if you fit within that, then it's okay to reach out. We always say, be respectful, be brief. But if you can obtain a phone number for someone and you want to make that call, there's nothing wrong with doing that. Now, foundations, just like any other organization, some of them follow best practices, some of them don't. I can't guarantee you're going to get a phone call back from everyone, but you certainly shouldn't hesitate to do that. But don't call and ask something simple like, what do you fund? Because you can find that out. You want to call and say, I've done research and see that you're interested in that. Let me tell you about my organization and how I would fit into what you're looking for. So yes, it's okay. If establishing an introduction would be even better if you know someone at the foundation or know someone who knows someone. In Foundation Directory, we also have a listings of staff members and board members. Run that list past other people in your organization or by your board members and see if they have anything in common with them. See if some of them are on LinkedIn. You can find out if you have similar links on there. The greatest thing is to be able to find an introduction if you can find someone who knows someone. That's not always possible. And in that case, a cold call may be the only way you can get to a foundation. But again, do your research and have an idea as to whether they might be good for you. Another question about capacity building grants and general organizations that fund general operating expenses. Again, it's still the exception rather than the rule. There is a way to search in Foundation Directory for organizations that do general operating support, but the best thing is that if you've established a relationship with a funder, maybe you get that first grant that's a restricted grant for a program, but once you establish that relationship, that's when maybe you want to start talking to them about, hey, would you consider a general support grant? Once they know you, there's a level of trust there. It might be easier to get those types of grants. And the same thing with capacity building. I assume you're talking about, like physical structure, things like that, which a lot of funders, some even say they explicitly won't fund it. Again, you can search in Foundation Directory for those, but those are the types of things that are easier to ask for once you've established a relationship. So others are about trends in funding. I can't speak with authority on those. There's you need to keep up with the nonprofit literature. There was the national report, CCS does an annual fundraising thing. And I think the percentage on foundations was more or less stable in terms of how much they're giving. I know there is a trend, as I said, for more general operating support. Not everybody's on board with that. It depends on the area you're in, and it depends on the funder. But those types of things, CCS's annual fundraising thing, Chronicle of Philanthropy, those are a good place to look if you're looking for specific trends for different areas. Another question, if you're a grant consultant, is there anything different you would do compared to working for an organization? Not really. The proposal writing process is the same. And as I mentioned, it takes a village. You're going the grant consultant, if you don't work for the organization, then you're going to have to put in, you're going to have to get the information from people who are in the organization. But that's the same for someone who works for the organization. If you have a different program group or financial group, you're going to have to coordinate with them in writing that. Another question on how to reconnect with a funder who supported a nonprofit for several years, but hasn't done so for the past 5 years, and which is no longer accepting unsolicited. Yes, the same thing with, and this is not a cold call. If you've been funded by them in the past, perhaps the person who handled the funding or who was their contact is no longer there. That gives you an opening to when you're reaching out with them, either through the letter of inquiry or through a phone call, to say, hey, you guys funded us, back in 2018, and, we're very grateful. We haven't, been in touch, but, are you interested in doing it again? So the approach would pretty much be the same, but that's a good thing. As I said, that gives you an in. Hopefully you still have the names of some contacts, but even if you don't, they'll have a record of it. So to go to them and say, yeah, you did fund me before. Would you consider funding me again? Definitely. There's no problem with doing that. How often do you need to update? Oh, in terms of talking about the seals are it's an annual thing. So they are, updated annually. There's information now about 2023 seals, and there will be a 2024. Most times you probably want to keep it up to date. It will show on your screen. So if you've earned a 2023 seal, when someone goes to your profile, they'll see that it was updated in 2023. So in 2024, they know the information is still pretty, relevant. If it starts looking 2 and 3 years old, you might want to update. And often it's not completely brand new information, except for the financials and maybe the staff information. So you should keep it up to date. And I see some other specific questions on GuideStar. Again, there is a help GuideStar. They're very responsive, and you can get specific answers about your claiming the seal. Yeah, questions about EIN and things like that, you should contact GuideStar Help, and maybe Carla will drop that link in there again. A freelancer not working for a specific organization. No, the limits of GuideStar and Candid profiles, it is only 501 or C or something organizations that are in there. So you can't create the profile for them. They would have someone from that organization would have to create the profile or be the profile owner. Now, if you wanted to create the content for them, you could work that out, but someone from the organization would have to own the profile. That's a good question. Because a lot of proposals are now online, use a web-based system, and they don't provide contact details. So how do you follow up? Sometimes if they're, they will, tell you where you can follow up, but sometimes they don't. And that's where, again, Foundation Directory can kind of come in, or even Google, and where you go to their website or go to their profile and find out contact information, who's working for there, or at the very least a phone number or an address so you can follow up. That can be very frustrating because not knowing when to expect an answer or things like that. But there are other ways you can try to find someone there to find out if you can follow up with them. Would you include testimonials from other donors or beneficiaries as supporting docs? No, not unless they ask for a reference. You don't want to include anything more than what they're asking for. If those donors, if they ask for references, then they can speak to them. And probably in your budget, you're going to mention those other donors, so they'll be aware that you do have other support. But no, I would not just send that out to them. 501c4 organizations. Again, a lot of funders will only donate to 501c3. 501c4s can accept individual donors and things, and they are in GuideStar. If you are a 501c4, you can claim your profile on GuideStar. But in terms of foundation grants, it's unusual for them to give to a 501c4. Fiscally sponsored organizations, that's another case where you don't have your 501c3, but you can be fiscally sponsored by a 501c3 organization that sort of acts as the middleman for getting those funds to you. They take you under their umbrella. So yes, some funders say they will not fund fiscally sponsored organizations. It just depends. That's another reason to make an introduction phone call to say, hey, I think, my group fits in with what you're looking for, but we're fiscally sponsored. We're not 501c3. Would you consider funding us? As I said, it's good to, if you're going to make a call, have a specific reason or a specific question you want to make. And as I said, keep it respectful, keep it brief. And don't ask them something that you can easily find out from their website or something. Yeah, again, a lot of GuideStar questions. Yeah, we have excellent help and customer support when you start the process of claiming your profile and earning seals, and they can answer those specific questions. What is a good answer when a funder asks how the program will be funded in the future? A truthful answer that, we are going to continue to seek grants. I mean, they know they're not the only source, and they don't want to be the only source for funding. So just to let them know that, you are going to continue to seek out additional grants. If you have government grants, if you have individual funders, the answer is that you tell them the truth, how you are planning to financially exist going forward, because again, that their grant is going to help you out at this point in time. It's not a guarantee for the future. A lot of questions about specific areas of funding, who funds in healthcare or things like that. Again, I encourage you to use Foundation Directory. You can visit one of our partners, or you can go to fdo.org to see about subscribing. But that is, Foundation Directory is one of the most comprehensive directories of funders. It has profiles with lots of information, and also information about the grants that they've already given out, so that you can see what is their pattern of giving and whether or not you fit in that. I've heard this before. Do you have advice for working with program staff and getting the necessary information for proposal with staff that may not be familiar with proposal writing? That is a question we get a lot, and I encourage anyone who has any ideas in chat. It can be very challenging in a larger organization where they don't necessarily understand, because fundraising is really everybody's responsibility. So if you can't get that information from the program people or the financial people, just kind of about, making that clear. It's like, hey, we're trying to get money to keep all of us paid and to keep things running. We need your cooperation. If you can get senior management on board, that usually helps a lot. But that is a challenge that we've heard a lot of fundraisers mention in organizations. Okay, another question. Yeah, 501c4, I'm not as versed in, but 501c3s are specifically for charitable organizations. 501c4, 501c6, these are organizations that are tax exempt, but they're not necessarily charitable. For example, professional associations, political PACs. These are organizations, they're all tax exempt, but they're not, specifically set up for charitable purposes, which is what most foundations are looking for. Those are the 501c3. So again, that's something to check with the IRS. But I think I've got to most of the questions. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. But thank you so much for paying attention today. I hope it was helpful. Good luck to you in your endeavors. And I hope you will take some of our other classes on project budgets and things at learning.candid.org.